divers! It is Wednesday, June 10th, 2020, and thank you for joining us on Facebook Live. We're excited for you guys to join us tonight. We have a great presentation for you all, and we are going to start off by first asking, where are you guys from? Go ahead and write in the comments where you're watching from. Are you here in Florida? Are you in Colorado? Are you up in New York? Where are you watching Facebook Live tonight? Throughout the presentation, we also love to see you guys interact with us. So go ahead and write any comments or questions that you might have. We'll get those answered. There is a tab that has a thumbs up, a heart, or a smiley face, and that allows us to know that you're still watching us and you're liking the content that you're seeing. So we hope that everybody is doing well. June is beautiful right now. The seas today, they had flat, calm seas. They had 50, 60 foot of visibility, and the waters are nice and warm in the 80s. So wetsuits can be tossed, and we can go diving in our rash guards and having a lot of fun out there, seeing the animals. And there's lots of turtles out there right now because the turtles have been nesting and coming out and resting on the reef. So lots to do here in South Florida. So if you're not in South Florida and you want to come visit, a lot of the stuff down here is opening back up. Hotels are opening back up, restaurants, all the dive boats are back running, and the beaches are back. And so, of course, I decided to put together a great presentation with my friends here. These are our 4C photo pros. We have Jason Spitz and Monica Shandel, and they are our 4C photo pros, and they're very, very talented photographers, but even more talented at shore diving here in South Florida. Pretty much every little macro photo that you see that's on our Instagram and on our Facebook pages comes from these two guys, or these lady and gentlemen. They're very, very, very knowledgeable on shore diving here in South Florida. So I said, hey guys, let's go ahead and put together a Facebook Live and allow people to learn a little bit about shore diving. So if you've never done it, you're going to get some information about how to plan for a shore dive. And if you already know about shore diving, then you're going to get a little bit more information about the secret spots that we have here in South Florida. So everybody wave hi. There they are, Jason and Monica. Again, guys, go ahead and give us that thumbs up, the heart, or the smiley face to let us know that you're watching and you're having a good time. Also, if you have any questions, write those in the comments. We appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. So we've got a lot of people from Delray Beach, Coral Springs, Boynton, Point St. Lucie, Gainesville, wow, Royal Palm. Anybody from out of town of the state of Florida? Let's see. All right, Toronto, Canada. All right. So we're really excited, guys. So a couple of things. Make sure that you're registered for the event, because I'm going to be sending you guys a really awesome deal, a coupon code that's going to be exclusive for you if you sign up. So go to the 4C website, www.force-e.com. Click on the event page and make sure that you register on our Eventbrite to make sure you get that coupon code that's going to be emailed to you later. All right, so let's go ahead and start. Oh, someone's from Michigan. I wonder if they've ever done any shore diving in the lakes there. All right, so Jason, Monica, why don't you go ahead and tell us about shore diving in South Florida?
Well, thank you, Nicole, and thanks for hosting us. We're really excited to be sharing this.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone out there. We appreciate it.
We see lots of names that are familiar and quite a few that aren't. For those of you who know us, you know that we love shore diving in South Florida. From early morning dives before the sun rises to midnight dives to in the middle of the night, 3, 4 a.m. We've kind of done it all in South Florida. Today, what we want to share is a little bit about how to get involved in shore diving. I know some people are always like, well, how do I shore dive? I've only been diving on boats. So we want to share a little bit about, some of the best practices, how to get ready for it, what you should expect, and then highlight a few sites. I already saw there was a question on there. I've heard a lot about Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, and yes, we're going to talk about that. Blue Heron, we'll give a little teaser about Blue Heron, although there's going to be a whole separate thing on Blue Heron Bridge. But But we'll talk about some of those other sites and where you can go. Maybe not go in depth today, but feel free to ask about specific sites as well. We'll be happy to answer them. So without further ado, why shore dive? Why should I, go out to the beach and do a shore dive versus getting on a boat? Well, there are a lot of really great sites in South Florida. You don't have to get on a boat, and that gives you some freedom. You don't have to worry about boat schedules and timing to get on that boat. Or, the boats have gotten pretty full. COVID is limiting the number of divers per dive and increasing the costs in many cases. If you don't want to spend that money, or on top of that, you just decide, hey, I've done 3 boat dives this week and that's my budget and I want to go out and dive. There really is not a lot of cost once you have your equipment. The other thing that we really like, and we're very avid photographers, is that shore diving gives us a lot more time underwater. It often allows us to stay in one place. A lot of the time the current is not nearly as strong, and they're generally easy dives. So they're in 4 to 10, 12, 25, 30 feet tops in most cases. So they're shallow dives that allow us to stay down 2-3 hours sometimes. And if we're working with a subject, we may spend 30 or 40 minutes just in one place shooting one thing. And a lot of times they're also patchy type reefs. So you'll find a lot of sand around the coral heads here. So you're able to sometimes plant yourself a lot easier and really work with the subject. So those are some of our reasons. So what equipment do you need? The first thing, and obviously different dive boats have different policies in South Florida. Some use flags, some don't. But when you're shore diving, you must use a flag. There are so many jet skis and motorboats and kayakers and others out and bathers and swimmers that not to use a flag is really dangerous. And so have your flag, 1 per dive buddy team. And then obviously on top of that, you should have your own safety sausage. They're shallow dives, but you don't want to come up under a boat propeller. So safety is always first. Other than that, it's your typical dive equipment: a mask, snorkel, fins, BCD, tanks, and weights. We always recommend a cutting device. That should be on all dives, but there is quite a bit of fishing line. A lot of times we're out there, we're cutting out the fishing line, and we encourage everybody to, bring yourself a little goodie bag if you can. In addition, I don't know, when we left, I think we sold 20 some odd masks. By the way, we've moved on our boat. So we are actually sitting on our boat doing this live stream from the middle of South Carolina today. And you will find masks, fins, snorkels, sunglasses, fishing line, fishing gear, beach chairs. It's amazing what you'll find within the first 500 feet of the shoreline. So it's kind of cool, but make sure you have a cutting device because you don't want to get tangled up if you miss something. As Nicole said, wetsuits, this time of the year, you don't need it, but we would recommend some sun protection of skin. Oftentimes you may want to kick out on top of the water. So something to cover your head, especially if you don't have a lot of hair like me. And the final thing to really think about is you're going to likely be leaving your car somewhere, at a portal, at a parking space. So today's car keys tend to be expensive car keys. If your car allows you to use a non-electronic key or a spare key, we recommend you bring that and put it in a key holder that is firmly attached to you. You do not want to lose your key. We've actually even ran a shore dive where somebody had it in their plastic box but didn't have it firmly attached to them and lost their key. So always think about, what am I going to do with my key? Some people use the magnetic key holders, do so. Some people hide it under a rock or someplace else around there. But, think about what you're going to do with your key, because that becomes a common question we have when we lead shore dives.
Right. And you can buy waterproof key holders at 4C, as well as flags. And I think we've got a couple examples here of some great flags, both the big blow up ones, which are easy to see from far away, and just the regular flag. So we highly recommend that if you don't have a flag, absolutely, it's the best investment you can make.
And if you look on the bottom right of this slide, you'll see that these are the three-sided flags. They are a little heavier to tow, but they really are much more visible when out there. Being boaters and being out on the water, we're amazed how long it takes sometimes to see a dive flag. And you should always be thinking, even though you have right of the way and people shouldn't be within 300 feet of you, these boats that are traveling at 25 or 30 miles per hour, a lot of them really can't see you till they're very, very close. So just be aware and think about that. And it's really important from safety. Enough said of that. So what we'd like to do is give you 5 tips that we think are good for local shore dives. And then we'll go into some specific dive sites from there.
Yep. So our first tip for shore diving is really survey the dive site. Kind of understand where you're going and what it looks like. And you can do this, a little bit of this before you actually go to the site. You can get a look at some of the publications. You can look at some things online. And then day of, you're going to want to check the tides. You're going to want to check the winds. You're going to want to check the weather conditions. We often look at the satellite radar just before we go because there's been times that we've gone in, it looks beautiful and sunny, and then you come out and it's not so beautiful and sunny. The other thing that we do is every time we get to a dive site, before we take any gear out, we kind of walk up and look at the entry and exit conditions. Does it look like it was forecast to look? And does it look like it's comfortable for us to walk in and out? Sometimes when we have storms, there's some sand movement and things that might make it a little more difficult to get in or out. So we like to look at that and also look at the sea conditions and just make sure that's what it's forecast to be and it looks good. If for some reason you get to the site and you're not feeling good about it, anybody can call the dive. And there's been times that I've called dives on Ben Jason's and I just said I'm not comfortable, or gosh, the visibility is terrible, or just didn't have a good feeling about it. And you shouldn't feel bad about that. Your buddy should be like okay with that, and then you just do it another day. So that's our first tip. Survey the site.
Okay, so tip number 2, that is to secure your rig. You really, and by rig we mean everything that you're bringing with you. You really want to make sure that any lights you bring, cameras, other gear, that spears, spear guns, GoPros. And sorry, I see somebody lost their GoPro by the bridge today. So if anyone finds a GoPro at Blue Heron Bridge, please contact George Hernberger. It's so common to find GoPros. So we actually, what we like is, and 4C has either the retractable ones for light things like the GoPros, or there's ones that look like the old phone cords that snap together. And we really recommend those for heavier cameras and rigs. But make sure, especially on beach dives with waves, we have seen and actually experienced losses of things. Fins are probably the number one things that people lose when they start diving. They think they're going to hold them in their hands and a wave hits them. You likely will at some point in time get knocked over by a wave. And if they're in your hands and not attached to you, so put them around your wrist or buy a big carabiner. A lot of people use those and they'll clip it off to a D-ring around the carabiner. Mask on. We always, people with masks on their foreheads. I think the woman on the right actually has one on her forehead, but you can see the gentleman on the left, everything is around his wrists. He's got his mask on. If your mask tends to fog, put it around your neck walking in, and then when you're at waist deep, put your mask on, but never over your head. The likelihood of it getting knocked off is pretty high. So we find, like I said, we found dozens of masks off our shores. And we recommend putting your regulator in your mouth. That doesn't mean you have to breathe from it, but that way, if you do get knocked over and you end up under a wave, you don't have a problem with that.
And then tip number 3 is know where you are. So the other thing that we always do before we get in the water is we take a compass heading because we want to know what direction we're going. It's pretty straightforward local navigation on South Florida. Pretty much every dive site that's on the shore is going to be going out to the east and coming into the west. And the reefs generally run north and south. So you definitely have to have a compass for shore diving sites so that you don't get lost and that you do tend to know which way to go. We also look at the entry and exit landmarks. So don't just look at the water when you're getting in the water. Turn around and look back at the beach, because that's what you're going to see when you come back. And look for something like a building or a lot or a tower, something that you'll go, oh yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. And most of the portholes have some pretty recognizable features to them. So it's pretty easy to kind of get back to where you are. The other thing is that if I'm going to a dive site and there's something out there I know I want to see, or a buoy I want to get to, I'll do a compass heading and do that as well. You can either swim from the surface out, or you can swim underwater. And if you have those compass headings before you start, it's really clear where you're going and where you need to come back to.
So the other thing with this map that you see, there are reefs everywhere, not far offshore, all the way from Palm Beach down to Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
And just, entries vary. So if you want to dive from the breakers, which very few people do anymore off West Palm Beach, there is no more parking along the side streets. It's all private parking, permit parking only. I've actually spoken to the police department, and there's nothing we can do. Now, we used to always drive to the end of the breakers, down to the beach, drop our gear, and then one of us would drive the 2.5, 3 blocks and find a parking spot downtown and park the car, and then we'd go do our dive, and then we'd come back and get the car and drive it back. So there are ways of doing it, but they're a little bit more difficult. We're going to share some of the easiest, but don't think just because we're talking about Lauderdale-by-the-Sea today or Pompano that those are the only places. It's just that these towns have made it pretty easy. So we want to share with you some of the easy, but anywhere that you can get in, you're likely to find reef. Now, Deerfield Beach has reef. We've gotten in parts of Deerfield and found nothing, and we've gotten in others. Same with Pompano. If you try to get in by the Marriott Hotel, so northern Pompano Beach, we've gone out and swam around and found just a lot of sand. But you go, it's less than a half mile south to the sites we're going to talk about, and those sites are just full of coral. So, there are sandy areas, there are coral areas, but there's nothing that stops you from getting in any place that's accessible and giving it a try. It doesn't have to be a map site. So tip number 4. This is all about really getting into the water. We call it bracing, ducking, and stepping. So the first is really brace for waves. You never want to turn your back to the waves when you're getting in, which also gets to a good point. Make sure before you get in that you take a look back and see what the scenery is behind you. Notice what, buildings are behind you and trees and other things, just so you're aware. But brace for those waves as you're walking in.
Right. And I like to turn sideways to the waves because that gives less of my body for the wave to hit. And I find it's a little easier when I'm going in. If I see a wave coming, I just turn to the side so there's less of me that can possibly get pushed over.
We typically recommend carrying your fins into about waist deep water and then using your buddy and, taking one leg over the other and putting one fin over, and then one buddy puts on their fins and the other. Help each other and steady each other as you get in. There are some people who put on their fins at the shoreline and start kind of backing in the first few feet or sidestepping. You can do that. We think it's a lot more difficult, and a lot more people tend to fall in our estimation of having seen that. So the other thing about the waves are, if you're in 1 to 2 footers, not too bad. But if you decide to go in and it's 3 to 4 foot waves, you may want to think about ducking below. Some of those waves can be pretty powerful. You're wearing a heavy tank, 40, 50 pounds worth of equipment. So don't be afraid. You're going to have your regulator in your mouth, your mask on. Just duck below and come out on the other side. The other thing as you're walking in is, shuffle your feet in, especially before you put your fins on. There are places that the sand is uneven. There are steps up and down, etc. But even more importantly, stingrays like to bury themselves in the sand, scorpion fish, and you'd be surprised they're not that far off the sand. And we actually met somebody, not a diver, but in a restaurant down in Pompano one day, and we're all talking diving, And the guy gets up and shows us, and he lost his foot. He stepped on a stingray, got really or scorpion fish, and got really infected. So, and he said it was right off the beach. So just be aware of that. It's not something you should be concerned about, but whether you're a swimmer or a diver or a snorkeler, anytime you're walking in, just shuffling in is the safest way of going in.
Yep. And tip number 5 is really just keep it simple. If the conditions are questionable or you're not feeling good about something, there's nothing wrong with canceling a dive. We've done that a couple of times and gone out to breakfast, and it turns out to be just a great day, and we dive another day. If you get lost underwater, so it's just like any other dive. If you're not sure where you are, you can't find your buddy, all of a sudden you're lost, you're going to come up safely and slowly. And again, you're going to want to come up with your flag or with the safety sausage, because there is some boat traffic out there, and nobody's going to know you're out there unless they have a marker that says, hey, here's where I'm at. So make sure that you're well seen. And then since we're at 4 to 25 foot depths for the most part in these reefs, you can come up pretty safely and easily. One thing that we didn't talk about already was when you first go in, we always check the current, and we always start to swim into the current on our dives. And then when we get to about a half a tank or wherever we decide we're turning around, we turn around, and then that way the current takes us back. There have been times that we've done that, and we've gotten in and gone into the current, and the current's changed. We've turned around, and we're all of a sudden swimming into the current. So maybe that's not comfortable. Maybe you shouldn't do that. So you can always, if you're running low on air, you can always come up to the surface, or you could just swim in from where you are. There's always another exit. I mean, all you have to remember is I'm going to go west to land. You can get to land, even if you don't go in the exact place that you came out. Most of these shore diving sites that we're talking about are pretty close to a road. So you could come out to the road, you could drop your gear, one of your buddy team could go get the car. We could also talk about, you could stage a car. You could have 2 cars and have one at one place and one at another. So if you really don't want to swim or worry about current, you could just go with the current, whichever way it's going, and end up right at your car. So just don't panic about any of those things. It's just like any other dive. You always find a way out.
Yeah, you can make a shore dive into a drift dive that way too, if you really want to. So we're going to talk a little bit about a few dive sites, and then we'll take some questions. So the first is Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. And I'm going to just give it a second because it looks like it's taking a second for these to catch up. And there's one more. So hopefully by now it's coming up for everybody. So this is the site with a Google map behind it of Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, south of Anglin's Fishing Pier. And I'm using my cursor. I don't know if you can see that, but at the top, towards slightly to the left, is the fishing pier that comes straight out. This is Commercial Boulevard. So if you take 95 to Commercial, either south or north, and come all the way to, they call it Elmar Drive, and that is kind of Beach Drive. You can take that and actually go north or south. So there's sites to the north of Anglin's. I'm not going to really go into those or show those sites today, but they are there, just like the sites to the south. There are 3 main portals to the south, and one of the ways you can see Lauderdale-by-the-Sea and know both from the water as well as from land is there is no building over 4 stories in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. So once you start seeing the taller buildings, it's Pompano Beach to the north. Once you start seeing the taller buildings to the south, it's Fort Lauderdale. So it's a cool little beach town. There's great restaurants for before or after your dive. And any of these 3 sites, Datura, Hibiscus, and Palm, they all have the same reef running. And I don't know if you can see the dark areas running under. I put these blue bars for the 3 sets of reef lines, but those are really, those run up and down this entire area. The first reef is pretty patchy. It's a 3 to 5 minute swim offshore. A lot of snorkelers use it. It starts in about 4 feet, 5 feet of water and goes to maybe 10 or 12 feet. So very shallow. patchy reef. It tends to be a little bit more stirred up a lot of the time, especially if there's waves. It's great on a nice flat day. But if you get out there and it's pretty hazy, milky, what we oftentimes recommend, keep swimming. You're going to hit more sand and rubble. And by the way, there's lots of little stuff in the rubble too. Nothing wrong with taking a look, take a look under a seashell, see what's there. There's lots of scattered rubble. Take a look around it. Lots of blennies and gobies and other small creatures. But we spend a lot of time on the second reef. And before I actually talk about that, there is in the red a shipwreck snorkel trail here. There's some cannons and other
big anchor.
There's a big anchor here. So that's easily found off Datura. There's actually a little swim buoy that you'll see, a mooring buoy. So if you go off Datura and you aim for that mooring buoy, you'll run into this snorkel trail and the reef there. There's also a reef project that was ongoing to grow coral. It's no longer being funded, but the structure is there. It looks like two sets of giant jungle gyms with corals attached to them. And the corals are still attached. There used to be solar panels and they were using electricity to see. I don't think it was highly successful in terms of the electrical current stimulating it, but they grew corals here, and that project went on for a few years. And so the structure and the corals are still attached to it.
And fish love to go there.
Yeah, and there's
a lot of fish out there.
There's always fish in this area, a lot of stuff, a lot of juveniles in the first patchy reef. As you get to the second reef, this is what there was an earlier picture of reef that looked like Swiss cheese. And this reef probably comes off of the seabed from 2 to 5 feet roughly. And it's a pretty solid reef structure there. The third reef is really a long swim. This is where you see all the mooring balls. You see all the boats moored out there. If you take it to the north, you'll run into the Copenhagen wreck. So many of the dive boats that 4C will book you on will take you out to this reef, to the Copenhagen and along that third reef. It's only in about 25 feet. The back end drops about 10 to 12 feet in places. The front kind of leads up to the sand. Very pretty, a lot of sea fans, staghorn coral is growing out in certain areas. So nice, but beware, there's a lot of boat traffic and you should be a really good swimmer if you go out this far. You don't need to. I'll make one other mention that this is you'll see people taking kayaks. There's a lot of free divers who go out and kayak out, but there's no reason you can't take a kayak and take your scuba gear and stick it in the back of your kayaks. We do that. So the 4C Pompano store does have a few kayaks that you can go look at for that and talk about. You can do a whole course on kayak diving, but you can take them right out. The beaches here are pretty short, and if you're going to go out to the third reef, that's another way of just getting out there. So I'll mention
saves you the surface swims out. So if you're also going to go out to those longer reefs, recommend that you do that on the surface on the way out, and then drop back down instead of trying to swim underwater, because by the time you get there, it's a 40-minute swim. It may be time to turn back around, or you may have to swim on the surface back. So recommend that you swim out. You can also check the boat traffic there, but kayak diving is fantastic. We love that. And it does open up a whole lot more sites for you.
So Lauderdale-by-the-Sea also, one of the reasons people like it is it has really great portals. And these portals, each of those three areas we talked about, Datura, Hibiscus, they each have these areas with seating. This is Datura with seating and tank racks. They have really good rinse facilities for both you and your gear. They actually have freshwater rinse. So if you live in an apartment or a condo and it's harder to rinse your gear, this is a great place. Of course, you could always go back to 4C and beg Gary to use their rinse tank. But you can see it's a really great place. It's also busy. The parking is right behind these. We will mention that the portals, all of the meters have been made into phone app meters now. They no longer take coins.
Right.
If you can't find a parking space, and on the weekends during the busy times of year, it sometimes can be challenging if you don't show up. You can drop gear with your buddy and drive a block or two up into town, and there are parking lots. There's also by the town hall, there's a road that goes behind it. There are parking meters all along there, and you can almost always find a parking spot no matter how busy the beach is. Along that, there's a park and the public works buildings and all that. Behind that, you'll find a lot of parking. So there's a good tip for you. These are some of the pictures we've taken at Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, and I think what we really want to say is that there are small things, there are tiny things, and there are some nice size things. So we find neon gobies quite often on the star coral. So look on the star coral feeding, and they're about an inch long. Roughhead blennies are the size of a pencil eraser. Look for little tiny holes. A lot of times in dead coral heads with algae growing, you'll see little tiny black holes. Watch for them. They pop in and out of these holes. We do see hogfish, and again, we mentioned that there are quite a few spear fishermen who like to come out here. Caribbean reef squid are quite common in this area as well. You'll see your normal things like angelfish and grunts and lots of grunts,
wrasse, lots
and
of damselfish,
butterfly fish, etc. Typical reef scenes, again, you see 2 to 5 feet. You're going to see sponges. You're going to see urchins. You're going to see lots of juveniles hanging around these little underhangs. Look under the underhangs because, we've found nudibranchs there. We've found all sorts of things. Nurse sharks are oftentimes hiding in the Swiss cheese or other parts of the reef. This one was nice that it came out and posed for a picture. They're really docile, so if you don't like sharks, nurse sharks are not something to be afraid of. They'll really sit there, let you get pretty close. Just don't pull their tails. There's a lot of feeding stations because there are a lot of juveniles. So in the bottom, you see a purple mouth moray that's being cleaned by a banded coral shrimp. And again, we talked about the scorpion fish. Be careful. They're in the sand and rubble. They're on top of the coral heads. They're quite a bit. You don't want to put your hand down on one of those. And we'll just make a note that we use muck sticks a lot, which is basically a stainless steel stick. There's really nice ones that they have with plastic handles and a clip ring at 4C. You could make your own by getting a piece of stainless steel if you don't want to buy one. But they're not expensive. They're a great investment, and it can actually use it to hold yourself off the reef so you're not damaging it. Keep your fins up, keep your hands off the reef. But it's a nice way of steadying yourself if you're going to be doing photography. So we highly recommend muck sticks. Yep. So the next site we're going to talk about is Pompano Beach. We're going to talk about
Pompano Beach. And this is another great place to go. This is also really conducive for kayak diving because there's not as many opportunities to park in good locations in Pompano Beach. But if you have a kayak, it gives you a lot more flexibility as far as places to go because the reef does run up and down this whole entire area that we're showing you on this map. But there's only limited areas that you can access the reef. I don't think we've also talked about this, but a lot of the guarded beaches, they do not want you to go out and scuba dive there. So if you're looking at a guarded beach and there's a lifeguard there, chances are they may ask you to leave or tell you that you can't dive there. So all the places that we're talking about today are not places that are guarded beaches with lifeguards actively there. So in Pompano Beach, we're going to show you a couple ones here. There's the Southeast 6th Street and Southeast 8th Street. You can see them by these two arrows here. And they're pretty much right around where the Lady Luck is, but much, much shallower. So much easier to get to. We love both of these sites. They're a little bit different than Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. It's more of the reef like you would see from a dive boat. There's not that Swiss cheese. I think it has a little higher relief. Again, there's tons and tons of life here. There's lots of juveniles. I've never seen any more juvenile angels than I have in Pompano Beach, honestly. And then all the regular things as well. This is when this advances, we're giving you another viewpoint of these two areas. Let that go ahead and come forward because it's a little bit of a delay here. for my map. But again, these are easy entry and exits. It's a straight walk from the sand. There are showers there. There's lots of nice, so that you can rinse off all yourself and your gear afterwards. And this particular slide, if you can see, we've kind of put on here where all the parking is, and that's where the orange is. Again, this is all metered parking. So if you can look here, this is Southeast 6th Street. This is Briney Avenue down here. There's some condos here, and there's parking on both sides of the street. There was an empty lot here. I think it's still empty. I'm not sure. Them can't be empty for long. And then there's more parking down here. So Southeast 8th Street has a little bit less parking, and I think there's a little less people that go there because of the limitations. And again, just like anywhere else, you're going to want to have your parking thing ahead of time, and you're going to want to plan it so that you can come and find a place to park. There aren't as many places nearby here to park as there are in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, whereas Jason mentioned you're going to go across the street or down a block or two. Here, it's a little more challenging if you're not able to find a location or a parking spot kind of there. So oftentimes what we would do is we would try to go to these sites, and if there was no parking, then we'd end up in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea just because there was parking there. So it gives you a couple different options so that you're not wasting an entire day driving out to a dive site and then not able to actually dive the site, because that's terrible.
It's also not that far from the new parking garage. If you saw that the pier was just probably 4 or 5 blocks
that's
up.
A good point.
So again, you could drop gear, and the portals there are really nice with an area you can kind of pull into. And their showers are actually right by the sidewalk there. So they just redid those. It's nice. So worst case, you could always, again, have somebody stay with the gear, somebody drive the 4 blocks and park in the parking garage and come back. So, parking, there's always an answer if you really want to dive a site.
Right. And rock, paper, scissors is the best way to decide who has to walk back to the car. So we've given you a couple more examples of some things that we might see there. So there's a lot of tube sponges and purple reef fish, and again, there is an area here that has just a load of staghorn coral. Like, I don't know, I think somebody must be planting it there because it's just like a field of staghorn coral. It's awesome. Christmas tree worms are another common thing, and as you can see from this picture of the typical reef scene, there's not that Swiss cheese. It's the pieces of coral and things I think are a little bit bigger here. It's a great place to find some lobsters when it's lobster season, which is coming up in just another month or so. So there's a lot of opportunities to see a lot of different things there. And again, lots of juveniles, lots of species. We've seen turtles there. We've seen sharks there. We've seen rays there. Some of the other bigger coral heads will also have just kind of, I think, congregations of fish, so to speak. And this glassy sweeper in the upper left is an example of one that there's just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them just swimming around. Some of them, we call them magic coral heads. We get to them and we just spend a long time there because there's so much to see. Again, there's spiny lobsters there. You might see some filefish there. Generally, the white spotted one in the bottom corner, you'll see them in pairs. One will have this coloration, one will be more orange. There's lots of different types of puffers, from porcupine fish to balloon fish. They're all out there, and what's really cool is the diversity on these sites is pretty broad as well. So I think that if you go to Pompano, or if you haven't tried it, it's a great place, and it's also an easy dive site, easy in, easy out, not long beach walks. So it's a fantastic place to try it out if you haven't tried it, or if you have and you're looking for a different site, this is another great place to go.
Hey guys, really quick, I want to know, how far is it to swim out in the Pompano Beach, those 2 sites you're just talking about?
They're pretty good. You actually start hitting little coral heads like probably 70 feet. I mean, it's not 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Probably 100 yards out. But the actual first spotty reefs are similar to Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, so probably 200 feet. Yeah, and then the second reef is probably another 5 to 10 minute swim from there.
Yeah, if you're swimming underwater, headed east to the Bahamas, and you've been swimming just at a leisurely pace for more than 20 minutes, you're probably past the second reef.
Yes.
And again, there are parts that it breaks up, especially in Pompano. So, if you start seeing something, turn a little to the west, turn north or turn south and take a peek and see what's going on. It's not that far out. And if you hit large expanses of sand, you may have swam past it. So the final site that we wanted to just give a brief mention to, and there's going to be an entire Facebook Live, we understand, on the Blue Heron Bridge. So we're not going to go into any depth. But the Blue Heron Bridge is a really special shore dive. It is one that is considered one of the top 10 shore diving sites in the world. Monica and I have done hundreds and hundreds of dives together. When one of us is busy, we oftentimes go, hey, see you later. You're never diving alone, even if you are alone there, because there's always so many divers. This is one of those dives, and I think I saw a question of, is there a time I can or can't dive the shore dives we were talking about? Well, most of the dives from Fort Lauderdale to all the way up through Palm Beach, those shore dives that are along the Atlantic coast, you can do any time of day or night, conditions permitting. So tides, high tide, low tide, sometimes low tide, the visibility may not be as good. So
high tide is better.
High tide tends to be better. You can take a look, around slack tide might be really good. But at the Blue Heron Bridge, because the water is coming in and out of the Palm Beach inlet, we get very strong currents coming through here. And on top of that, visibility just diminishes tremendously. So typically you dive an hour before to an hour after for a 2-hour dive at the Blue Heron Bridge. You could push it maybe an hour and a half before. Before tends to be slightly better usually than after. But the tide's coming in and out. So you want to dive at high slack tide. You can get a tide table either on the 4C website. You can look at tides.com. You can go into one of the stores and they've printed out the 2020, and they always have 2021 ready well before the season. So there are night dives that 4C sponsors here twice a month. If you've never done a night dive, this is a phenomenal place to do it. This is just one of those really easy dive or snorkel sites. There's artificial reef here. There's statues of hammerheads. There's a whole trail with artificial reef. But the real amazing stuff is just the rubble that's there and what lives in the rubble. The different species of crabs and shrimps. And, on the west side, we typically see, as you walk off the beach, there are almost always pipefish in 6 feet of water. There are pipe horses there part of the year, almost every single year. There are mating frogfish, and we're talking several pairs. Finding a frogfish, most people go to the Pacific or they go to Bonaire in hopes of seeing one if you go the right time of the year. So this is a favorite site, and I highly encourage you to look up the tides. If you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, or you want to just see some of the best things, you want to see a seahorse, well, go to 4C and ask for a dive guide. You will get your money's worth, and you'll be escorted by somebody like Jeff, who dives there multiple times a week and knows where the creatures are of that week. And that's how we used to be. We're there all the time. You'd know where things are. So really, really kind of special place that you'll see all sorts of things. Our last slide kind of shows some of the things that we found there, from tiger gobies to mating frogfish to last year a skittlefish that sat, and there was only one, and it sat on the sponge, and it was something it had been seen there years and years and years ago at the site, but nobody had seen a skittlefish in a long time. I found it last season, and it was probably there, 4, 6, 8 weeks on the same, never moved, just moved around this piece of sponge, and dozens and dozens of people came and saw it. And there were times we were dove a few weeks later that we'd smile because there'd be 3 or 4 people waiting to look and photograph the skittlefish. So
yeah, that didn't move. And if you are a fan of octopus like I am, you have to do night dives at the Blue Heron Bridge. I don't know, there's very few nights that I've done a night dive there that I haven't seen an octopus. So it's amazing. And this is also another great site to go do during the day, get really familiar with the site, and then do a night dive as well. So that's another way to do it and really get comfortable with both shore diving. And that goes for any of the shore dives. We've done almost every single one of them at night as well. So doing them during the day, you kind of get a lay of the land. You know what the terrain looks like. You can see things. And then at night, it's not so disorienting. You know exactly what you're kind of going into and what it should look like. And the creatures at night are always different.
And again, this is a dive site that is typically from 4 feet to 20 feet. The only difference is you're going off the beach headed south. So it's south to get off, north to come back, and then east and west to the two sides of the bridge, and you can dive either side. They've been doing some construction on the bridge span on the west side, so a lot of people have been doing the east side right now. But a great place. So, yeah. And you'll hear more about that in another one. So just to finish this off, and then we'll take questions. So resources, go into any 4C store. The staff really know the sites well around here. They can tell you both shore dive sites and boats to go on to meet whatever need you want. The 4C website has a go diving section that has some information on some of the sites. Go on YouTube and type in any of the cities and diving and shore dive sites, and you'll find what other people have done. People love to share that stuff.
Yep.
There's a new series of Reef Smart books and maps, of which Nicole, by the way, has a discount for everybody tonight on those. If you're interested, and they'll highlight some of these sites. There's a older shore diving book that is available at the store. It's kind of a almost like a loose leaf bound type book. It is old, so information on parking and the sites, it's not always accurate, but somebody actually hand drew all the sites, and we oftentimes use that to go to sites that weren't frequented that often, and we found it helpful.
And it gives you some ideas of some other sites to go to and check out.
And it's only a few dollars. It's not a very expensive book, so that's just something that you can use as a resource. And then finally, don't forget about Google Maps. If you want to explore new things, take that satellite view, and you can see in the shallows, you can kind of see where the reefs are and the patches and the lines of reefs. I don't know how well you could see it on the photos we put up, but Google Maps can really be your friend here as well. And we'd be happy to take questions. We're not hearing you, Nicole.
Oh, now
we are.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a couple of questions coming in here. Let me first let everybody know the book that they're talking about is the Reef Smart Guides. There's a Fort Lauderdale version, and there is a Palm Beach version. The guys that put these out came out and personally went through to all these dive sites and mapped out all these different dive sites. Now, it's not just shore diving, it's also some boat dives with wreck diving. I think this one here, somewhere in here. Anyways, so going back in, there's lots of great information in here about shore diving. And right now, we have a coupon code. If you guys go on our website and go to the shop page and find the Reef Smart Guides and you want to buy this book, we're doing 20% off for you guys that are watching. That's right, guys. And the code is REEF 2020. So REEF 2020. All capital letters, REEF 2020. That is the coupon code to get 20% off any of the Reef Smart Guides for the next 2 days. It's going to be 20% off for you guys. So it's a great book, great resource. We do have a few of those smaller books that they're talking about. We're trying to get the guy who wrote those to kind of update them before we get another shipment. So hopefully we'll be working on that with them. Guys, some people asked some other dive sites, and I'm going to kind of like nudge Jason and Monica on these ones. So Palm Beach, you guys talked about the Blue Heron Bridge. Some people want to know a little bit more if there is some shore diving, and I'm going to go ahead and jump in there and let them know that a lot of the beach up in the Palm Beach area is it's not public accessible because of the nice big mansions that have those beach front properties. Yep. So it's really hard to do beach diving in Palm Beach because of that reason. And also the reef, the first reef ends in Boca Raton. So you really don't have that swim out to that. You'd have to go to the second reef, which is going to be a lot more, it's deeper and it's also a lot more to kick out. So that's why a lot of people here, when you hear Palm Beach, you think of Blue Heron. However, I did want to mention that, Boca Raton is part of the Palm Beach County, And some people have done, it's called Rev Reef Park.
Yep.
And so I know, Jason and Monica, it's been a long time since you guys have done that shore dive. However, that one is in the Palm Beach County. And if you want more information about it, come in and talk to our BOCA staff. Not everybody goes out there to really see a bunch of reef. It's very patchy. Sometimes it's got a lot of sand. But if you're a beginner and I just want to go diving, it's something to do. So don't get your hopes up on having this beautiful, pristine reef like you would down in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. But Red Reef Park does offer where you can not just dive, but you can snorkel. So it's a great place for some families to go.
Yep.
And then going a little bit further north, if you're in the Jupiter area, if you go right inside the inlet, okay, there is like a little cutout area to the south part of the inlet. And in that area, it's not a reef. It's not anything really to see, but sometimes you see sea turtles there. So if you wanted to check that out, that is also available. And you can make sure you have your dive flag, and you can go along the rocks there, and you'll see some reef fish along that rocks by that inlet. If you are going to do any inlets, please, guys, dive flag, safety sausages, please have all that equipment. We do not want to hear about anybody getting run over by boats, because guess what? We cannot control who can drive boats. They don't have driver's license, unfortunately. So we want to make sure everyone stays safe, okay? So please make sure, don't get in if there's a ripping current, and definitely if you're at that inlet, don't dive in unless it's at high tide. It's not going to have good visibility. And they talked about the visibility and the tides for that area. But let's talk about the seasons. I feel like people want to know what's the seasons to do any of these shore dives. And my opinion is you can dive year round on most of these sites. Yeah. There's really nothing that's holding you back besides the weather. But you know what? We sometimes say that it's a little bit more bumpy in the winter here, and it's calmer in the summer, but you sometimes have winters that it's flat and you can get out. So a lot of people were able to go for January, February this year and do shore dives because it was so nice.
We dive year round. I mean, we dive year round. Obviously we wear a 5 mil wetsuit in the winter for us because it gets a little chilly, but really it really has to do with the conditions. What you do see is different things, different times of the year when the water cools off and the temperatures are not too warm. You sometimes see certain corals growing that as the temperatures spike up into you talk about the 80s. Well, as you start getting 82, 84, 85, and our water temperatures sometimes get to that, some of the corals that we have these seasonal die-offs or seasonal bleaching. So it's, you see different things, different times of the year. Without a doubt. So
I was going to mention that, like, especially during the nesting season for sea turtles, you might actually see when you're swimming out, if you see the sargassum seaweed on the surface, stop and look at it. Seriously, put your mask on and look at it, because you might find little baby sea turtles hanging out in that seagrass, because that's where they usually go to eat when they hatch. So you might get some of those guys. You might see some juveniles in the sand there hanging out. Back in the seaweed, you might see some filefish, I believe there's a seahorse that likes to live in there. And maybe
that like to live in there. Yeah, lots of stuff.
If you see that stuff, stop and investigate it. You never know what you're going to see. And for our seasons, they usually tell you, okay, there's the sea turtles, and then there's the season where you have the glide groupers, but those are usually out on the deeper wrecks and a little bit some of the reefs in Palm Beach County.
Right.
However, there are times that you guys swim out and you might see a Goliath grouper. There used to be one at the Hall of Fame Reef. I think it got speared, but I know that one was really popular for a while. So you never know what you're going to see. I've been out at the Blue Heron Bridge and in Pompano, and I've had manta ray swim right over the top of me. So, it might be small things at first, but then again, keep your head on a swivel and you might notice that there's animals that are bigger than you swimming by. So
we had Goliaths at the Blue Heron Bridge this year. So, I mean, we've seen manatees, Goliath groupers, sharks. I mean, there's all sorts of things. You did mention Palm Beach, and I just wanted to throw out that right south of the Boynton Beach Inlet. There's a park there, and you can dive. There's actually some artificial reef that's in there. There tends to be a lot of sand, but there's also some pretty neat critters, a lot of juveniles around some of that. So I wouldn't put it as a huge area with beautiful reef, but it's definitely a nice dive in what's typically 12 feet and less. You just have to be careful not to go north into, it's a very busy inlet with a lot of small fishing boats, right. Boynton Beach. So you really want to be careful. But that's a free parking lot actually across the street. So it's where all the fishermen fish from the pier. So you can go there, walk across the street onto the beach, and just go in. And we've had some pretty good dives there. A lot of small puffer fish and small juveniles.
So you guys, we talked about some of the Palm Beach ones. I'm going to go down to the Fort Lauderdale. So if anybody is interested, between Oakland Park and Sunrise, there's metered parking, and you can go out there. One of the sites is called Hall of Fame, and it's quite a kick out. It's about 1,200 feet to kick out to there. However, it's lots of great animals to see out there. Lots of great reef structure to dive off of. So that's another site in Fort Lauderdale if you're looking to go a little bit south of the Pompano Beach area. And then you guys, you have a lot of experience in the Dania Beach. There's the Jacks and there's some other dive sites. Can you tell people about that?
Yeah, I think the Dania Beach Jacks it's a site that we've always really enjoyed. And obviously there's a huge parking lot and there's a restaurant right there. And you can go paddleboarding in the river afterwards if you'd like. So it's kind of a multi-use place, but you go down to, what's the name of the park? I'm blanking at the name of I want to say John Lloyd, and it's not.
I don't remember either.
Sorry, we're blanking on the name of the park.
It's where the Dania Beach Pier is. So all you have to do is go down where the Dania Beach Pier is, and then just go a little past and park right there, and just go a little past, and you can go in on either side of the pier. Just be careful, as with any shore dive, anywhere you're near a fishing pier. You don't want to be underneath the pier. You want to stay a few hundred feet away from the pier, but there's plenty of places, and there's these artificial concrete jacks out there, which has congregations of fish. You can take them all the way out. It's a nice little way to go out. You can go out to the reef and just wander around out there for a bit, and then bring those right back. So it's a great navigation aid as well as having tons and tons of fish.
So to get to the Eurojacks, the best thing to do is park as close to the pier as you can in the restaurant. And then you're going to walk north along the beach. And wearing your scuba gear, it feels like you can also go to the state park and go to the second parking lot, and you'll be a lot closer. You have to pay to get into that parking lot, so just be into the state park. But you can do that and park off into the dirt. But if you park by the pier, you walk up and you'll actually see a cement. They look like the kids' jacks. That's what we're talking about. But they're giant cement, like 6 foot tall jacks. And there's one on the beach, and you go in right by that, and you'll find the jacks right there. And they go out east and west. So from the beach, they'll go straight. So if you don't see it quickly, just go a little north-south from there, and you'll find them. And there's hundreds and hundreds of them lined up for, I don't know, probably 400 or 500 feet out until it hits the reef. It actually hits that first piece of big reef there. And then you can go on the reef if you make it out that far. But we usually get so enamored in the jacks, we never make it out past that. Yes. But it's a really, really neat site. And it's, again, fairly easy. You got a little bit of a walk. That's the only thing.
Okay. So, wait, hold on. What's going on?
It used to be John Lloyd, but they changed the name. I can't remember. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, we can't remember the new name either.
Cameras are working like crazy. Hold on one second. There we go. All right, you hear me?
Yep,
yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, they don't want to, for some reason, I'm going to hide. All right, so you guys can hear me, right?
Yes, just can't see you.
That's okay. All right, so a couple of people are asking about the Blue Heron Bridge. I'm just going to go back to that. You guys talked about the night dives, which are awesome, but right now, everybody, because of the COVID-19, beaches are not open at night. It's only from sunrise to sunset. So that's all beaches in the South Florida area. So because of that, the Blue Heron Bridge is lumped into that. So we are not able to offer the night Blue Heron Bridge dives that we do twice a month. So unfortunately, sorry you guys, no signs of opening for June, but maybe in July. We will keep you posted. So make sure you're watching our Facebook page, because let me tell you, Jeff Nelson is gonna like do a little like break dance when those go back to letting us use those permits for the night dives. So,
although there are some boats, I think, starting to go out and take people. So it's only the beach. So you guys can book them on a boat to do a night dive there, I believe, right?
Yep, that's correct. So if you guys are interested, you can contact our Riviera store, because the boats up there are taking people out to the bridge, and we can get that scheduled. So guys, people asked, is there any apps for parking? And I answered the one guy, but I want to let everybody know, Pay by Phone is the app. Okay, you go down to the shore, but they're asking for apps for the weather that you guys would use to help figure out if the shore diving is good for them.
Oh, yeah.
So I know that I like to look at Magic Seaweed. I think that's a good one to kind of give you an idea of waves and current and winds. And Jason has a bunch that he uses.
So Predict Wind is probably my favorite. They do have a free version that's good for shore diving. We actually use it for our sailing adventures and have a paid version. Predict Wind. NOAA Weather is good. Dark Sky. The weather app that comes. Another one is Windy, because things like Predict Wind and Windy have a lot of information on currents and wave heights and wavelength and how long. So those are really good. And then I like things like the Dark Sky and the NOAA Weather for their radar apps.
Yeah, and tides.net, if you want to know the tide for any given location, you can go on there and just choose any location and check out what the tide times are. If you want to try to do it at a more of a high tide than a low tide, or if you just want to see what that situation looks like.
There was a question, Nicole, from Tommy Hatch about asking what's 100 or 200 yards past the mooring balls at Pompano Beach. So we took our boat out a lot and moored up to the balls, and we did do shore dives as well and swam out to the mooring balls, but it's a long swim, and not for the faint of heart. So past from the boat dives, we sometimes tried going past the mooring balls. We found some patchy reefs after you hit the wall, and we're talking about heading east from the mooring ball. So I'm assuming that's what he's talking about. If you're talking heading eastbound, it becomes very patchy and a lot of sand and just starts getting progressively deeper. If you're talking about going west from the mooring balls along the top, that's all in 15, 20 feet, and there's a huge amount of sea fans there. This is where we found a lot of staghorn coral. You find all sorts of juveniles there. There's a lot of stuff to be seen there as well.
Awesome. So I think Tim Sullivan said, can you dive the Lady Luck from the beach? Guys, please don't.
No, definitely no. I wouldn't even do that with a kayak. There's always a current there. Yeah. You need a boat to take you there, a commercial boat. Yeah. Or a private boat if you really
with somebody on top, but the currents there are typical. Unfortunately, it's become a dive site where the current just whips there because it's so close to the inlet, to Hillsborough Inlet. It tends to be one of those things. We never did it off our private boat or anything like that. It's just a tough site.
Okay, so some people asked about hotels that they can stay at, where they can stay and then dive right from there on the beach. And so I know down in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, we're going to give a shout out to the Windjammer. The Windjammer is a really nice hotel. It's not big, and it's right there on the beach in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. They have actually a pool on site, so you can go and do your dive and then go relax at the pool. And they allow, it's a scuba friendly hotel. So, you can wash your gear off and hang it, and no one's going to tell you, take it off your balcony, So we definitely love the Windjammer. We definitely refer people to the Windjammer. They actually have a live cam that is at the Windjammer, so you can take a look before you drive down there and see if you want to, do the dive. So
we left that out of our presentation.
That's another great thing. There are beach cams just about everywhere, so you can look at the beach conditions from those web cams before you get in your car and drive, especially if you have a longer drive to get to a site.
Boca has them, Hillsborough Inlet has them, Lauderdale, and I don't know why we didn't talk about that, but that's a miss. And yeah, those they can save you a drive just by looking at the conditions.
Also, just wanted to give you guys some information. Jason and Monica, since they've decided to retire on their sailboat and drive away from us, we have a new kid in town, Ron. He is at our Pompano store, and he's decided to take over the shore diving for 4C, our meetup shore diving that we do. And so we're looking about maybe doing one this Sunday. We got to take a look at what the conditions are and get the logistics. So stay tuned. We'll put that on our Facebook page, and we'll also put it on our website if we are going to run one this Sunday. So if anybody's interested, just stay tuned or write to us at info@force-e.com if you're interested, and we can give you more of the details once we kind of plan this out. But it's always about, making sure that it's the right conditions, and so we have to take a look at what the weather's doing. So last question I have, someone's asking about Bathtub Beach. Do you guys know where that is?
No, that's a new one for us.
Yeah, I don't know. Cindy, let us know what you're thinking there. We're not sure about that site. Let's see. Jack's location was told to locate the jacks by the white pole on the beach. Ah, yes, that's right. Those Euro jacks. All right, so guys, let's go ahead and wrap it up with what's the coolest thing you've seen on a shore dive?
Wow, that's a really tough one. There was one shore dive that I did with a friend of mine where we were out pretty close to the pier, not close to the pier, but out that distance-wise, and I probably saw about 500 rays just coming overhead, and it was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like it since.
And for me, I don't know. We've seen so many cool things. I think one of the things that sticks in my mind is, probably a couple times a year we see coronet fish, and they're just so amazing to watch. And we've had a couple really come close, and they're usually pretty skittish. But there's been a couple times they've come and stuck around for a few minutes and let us interact with them, and that's kind of cool.
Nice. So guys, I know that you've been trying to use that coupon code, that Reef 2020. I am so sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. And since I'm on Facebook Live, it's hard for me to, try and fix it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get off the live and try and fix it. So give it about 2 hours to make sure it's fixed. And you can go on there and get yourself one of these Reef Smart guides, the Fort Lauderdale or the Palm Beach version. Those will be on sale for 20% off, and we would love for you guys to pick one of those up and go do some diving. And Jason, Monica, thank you so much for the great presentation. Everybody really loved it, and we want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Make sure you give a thumbs up, a heart emoji, or a smiley face to let us know that you liked it, and share it with your friends. This video will be posted later on our timeline on Facebook. And also I'll upload it to the YouTube channel so you can rewatch it, so you can take a look at some of the maps and some of the information that they gave you. So guys, thank you so much, and we appreciate it. Everyone have a great Wednesday evening. See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.